About 5 years ago, I was struggling to describe my professional identity. I dreaded that question, what do you do? As an academic, I decided to turn this into a research project, and I began studying professional identity. But I became overwhelmed with all the data I collected. So I went to my advisor to ask for help, and he told me, well, it's simple, you just look for themes and patterns, and the findings will emerge from the data. And I was like, I don't know, this doesn't seem right, but I went home and kind of took a break. And I was sitting there and I noticed a book on my coffee table. And I picked it up and started flipping the pages. And it was a bunch of paintings by Rene Magritte. And I came across an image that just struck me. It was this one. I thought, what is that? And if you know surrealists, they like to play with reality and change things up. And I know what happens when you take a fish and you put it with a human, you get a mermaid. But that's not what this is. This is something entirely different. And then it struck me. This is what I'm hearing in my data. I had just interviewed a woman who is a teacher, and we were talking about what she did in the classroom. And she said, well, sometimes I listen to my students. I help them with their problems. I give them life advice. And I said, well, is that like being a counselor? She said, no, I wouldn't call myself that. She said, well, is it being an empath? And she said, no, it's not that exactly either. We didn't know what to call it. We couldn't find a name. And I realized she's like this fish human. She's taking these two different parts of her professional identity and putting it together in a whole new form. She's a whole new type of professional. She's a hybrid. And that's what I am too. I'm a hybrid professional. I'm a researcher and an artist and an educator. In fact, the way that I'm using research and using paintings to make sense of data, well, who does that? What is that thing? I'm a whole different type of identity right there. And as I talk to other people and ask them about their professional identity, they're struggling to describe what they do. This is a common problem. And this matters because it's a competitive workforce out there. And you have to be able to explain what your professional value is. Now, the way that people currently solve this problem is they list their different identities. They'll use commas and slashes. They'll have multiple business cards, even different websites. You may have noticed on LinkedIn, people have different identities listed in the header of their profiles. And that's great, except that starts to become confusing because you wonder, well, what do you really do? And what do you do well? It starts to lower your credibility, and people don't understand how these different parts of you fit together. Up until now, we've only had two ways to describe our professional identity. The first way is singularity. You're one thing, you have one title, you're a specialist or an expert. The second way is multiplicity. And that's when you do a lot of different things, right? I just described that. We know there's a lot of terms for this, like being in the gig economy, or a freelancer, a job crafter, a multi-talented professional even. People that just have one job title might also wear a lot of different hats in that role and be doing different things, and that's also multiplicity. So what about people that aren't using singularity or multiplicity because they're crossing back and forth between their identities? And they're not compartmentalizing what they do. They're not just doing that and that. They're blending. Well, that's the missing piece. That's the critical way we haven't been able to talk about how to frame our identity, and that's hybridity. Hybridity gives us the permission to integrate across our different professional identities. Hybrid professionals are people who blend and combine their different professional identities together, working from the intersections of those different identities. That's where their unique value lies. It's your differentiator and your secret sauce. Because when you're working from those intersections, you can do things nobody else can do and see things nobody else can see. And that's what makes you stand out. You're finally using all your different professional abilities. Think of hybridity like pizza. You have a bunch of different ingredients. You can eat them one at a time, but they're so much better when you eat them together. It's delicious that way when you bake it in the oven. But sometimes we add new ingredients to pizza that don't sound like they would taste good, like pineapple or barbecue chicken and arugula salad. And suddenly, there's a whole new type of pizza that was created. And pizza restaurants have so much fun creating these new types of pizza and giving them fun names, like Ricotta Be Kidding Me and the Black and Blue Burger Pizza. And you go to that restaurant just because you love that pizza, and that's just like your hybridity. You're bringing these different ingredients together in a whole new way. Let me tell you about a couple examples of two professionals that are amazing hybrid professionals. This is Justin Gitlin. He calls himself a creative developer, but his professional identities are being a coder and a digital artist and a game designer and a musician. He created this piece for the Denver Art Museum, and it was called Dance Lab. The way it worked is you would stand in front of a camera, and it would take pictures of you doing different dance moves. And then it would stitch those together into an animation and project that back on the wall so that you were in an interactive dance exhibition, and people loved it. They'd never seen that before. Another project Justin did was for Nike. This was in their Soho store. And they were celebrating 30 years of the Nike Air Max sneaker. This time, Justin took a transparent LCD screen, and there were sensors embedded, and would move around the store and hover over sneakers, and you would see these video animations about the sneaker that brought it to life. Again, he was able to do that because he used his different identities in that hybrid way. The other example is T. Chang. She used to be an industrial designer. And then she was making hairbrushes and bicycles, but she decided to change careers, and she became an entrepreneur. And she started her own company called Crave. Now, Crave has a bunch of products, and they're all about women's pleasure. Because T is changing the narrative on sexual pleasure not being something that's guilty or shameful, but instead it can be luxurious and well-designed. And T is actually wearing one of her products. It's that necklace. And it's actually called the Vesper, and it's a vibrator. Because who would have thought that you can make a vibrator that's so beautiful you want to wear it as a piece of jewelry in public? And that's her hybridity. So what do you call people like T and Justin? They defy traditional titles. They don't have a conventional job title, right? But some hybrids are coming up with unique names, like an artpreneur, or a hairpist, or a starchitect. Others are just coming up with creative, inventive names, like the chief animation architect, or the motherhood sanity builder. Now, the point I want you to take from this is that you can have multiple professional identities, and we need that in the workforce. But what happens when you're connecting those identities together? What are the relationships between them? Because that's what matters. When I realized that I'm a hybrid professional, it radically reframed how I saw myself, and it enabled me to talk about my identity in a way that I was able to get jobs I didn't know I could get. When I interview people about their professional identity, they actually can't tell me what their hybridity is because it's such a new concept and they've never thought about it before. So instead, I listen to words they use to describe the way they feel in their work. When they tell me that they're energized and they're most alive, when they're in that zone of genius or flow, those are signals that you're in your hybridity because you're bringing the best parts of your professional identity together instead of segregating and separating them. And when you bring it together, you are your fullest professional self. I believe hybrid professionals are a game-changing idea in the workforce. And I want to leave you tonight thinking about this. What are your different professional identities? And how are you crossing and combining them? Who are you in those intersections? And what type of hybrid do you want to call yourself? Thank you.